Welcome to the Grazing Grass Podcast, episode 203. Today we talk with Matt Goble of Dry Bottom Farms. He's in a mountain valley grazing wool sheep and using private land, marginal land, to do it. It's a wonderful episode. We talk about his practices to be efficient, what he's doing with his breeding, all under the context of working a full-time W-2 job. We also get into he's recently added meat chickens, layers, and turkeys to his operation. And you'll have to listen and find out what really surprised him about those. You're listening to the Grazing Grass Podcast, where we share journeys of grass farmers doing grass-based livestock production using regenerative principles. I'm your host, Cal Hardage. Hey ranchers, ready to start 2026 with a sharper focus on profitability? Noble Research Institute is kicking off the new year with two powerful courses. First, the Business of Grazing, January 21st through 23rd in Bossier City, Louisiana. You'll calculate gross margins, analyze real-world water and fencing investments, and build grazing plans that turn business goals into daily action. Then Noble Profitability Essentials, February 4th and 5th in Ardmore, Oklahoma. You'll plan for positive net farm income, create full budgets, and use ratios to benchmark your ranch and remove what's dragging down your bottom line. Noble pairs in-field research with ranch management expertise, giving you practical, real-world solutions. Visit noble.org today and start your year strong. For 10 seconds about the farm, I don't think I really have anything about the farm. It's that time of year. Holidays are upon us, and I hope you have a Merry Christmas and wonderful holidays with your celebration. We will be taking time off and not taking care of our animals. Oh, wait, no. We will be taking care of our animals while enjoying the holidays. And I know, just like you, those animals still need to love and care during this time of year. So enjoy your time in Oklahoma. We are having a heat wave this week, so I guess we'll survive. For 10 seconds about the podcast, you know, I love sharing things on the podcast. I love the community within the podcast. Last week on episode 202, shared CRADLE, our acronym for those 5-6 soil health principles. I had a friend point out to me that just in the latest episode, I do episodes here, Stockman Grass Farmer does issues. In the latest issue of the Stockman Grass Farmer, December 2025, Steve Kenyon laid out his under the GRASS framework. And GRASS stands for graze period, rest period, animal impact, stock density, and soil armor. So getting to those same core principles, but that's another way to remember. So the goal is something that works for you. So if that works for you, wonderful. If CRADLE works for you, wonderful. If you have a different way you like to think about them, share them. Jump over to Grazing Grass Community and share them there. With that being said, let's check out our coming events and then get into our conversation with Matt. Matt, we want to welcome you to the Grazing Grass Podcast. To get started today, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your operation?
You bet. So I'm located in central Utah. It's a small town called Fountain Green. It's actually used to be one of the largest sheep hubs in the United States, believe it or not. Yeah. The population of 700 people. But I grew up, my background is, I'm actually or sixth generation in the sheep industry in the United States, depending on how we kind of argue. I've got ancestors that came from Canada and raised sheep. I got heritage in England, and supposedly they were part of the King's Shepherd flocks, I guess. I don't know. We're still trying to find some of that genealogy, I guess you'd say. But I grew up on a smaller farming operation. So my family historically One of the things I was going to bring up was kind of the Western sheep industry. So I came from a traditional Western range background. So lots of public lands. I mean, herd sizes of 1,000 to 1,200. So they had around 2,500 sheep, and it was very nomadic, right? You have your summer range or winter range, and you trail those animals between. They sold that operation in about the mid 70s due to some financial setbacks and things that had occurred. So my dad always kind of kept a small flock of sheep, but we consider a farm flock around 100 to 200 ewes. Yeah, had some cattle as well. And then I was the crazy one who decided I really liked the sheep industry, really liked agriculture, and always wanted to grow. So currently my wife and I have around 450 ewes. We don't utilize any public lands grazing. So it's kind of different than some of the operations.
Oh, yes.
It is 100% private land, and we've shifted to irrigated pastures that are utilized through the predominant amount of the growing season, with a little bit of rangeland through maybe late winter, early spring. But most of that is going to be local irrigated type land. We don't get a whole bunch of rain. So if anything here is going to grow something in the summer, it has to get irrigation essentially. So we took land that was actually what I would consider marginal, meaning it didn't have as much or high quality irrigation. So as far as crop production, maybe it wasn't high value. And I saw that as a great opportunity to begin an amp grazing type system or mid grazing type system and go from there. And that's been very beneficial, and utilize things with cover cropping and a really huge focus on soil health and those principles.
I had the opportunity to go to Utah and visit Redmond Minerals this past summer. And just the area, the land was just so different than what I was used to. We went on some private land and looked at what they were doing, but it was non-irrigated. Just, you mentioned some marginal land, irrigation. Are you mainly in the valleys then? Or
Yeah,
you got
so
some up on the mountains?
no, so everything I do is in the valley. I'm within 20 miles of everything that I actually utilize.
Oh, okay.
So you're right. When you look at the Western United States, you've got your mountain ranges, which is considered what we consider summer type pasture, right? That's the snow. As the snow melts later, a lot of that's going to be mid-June, early July, and then maybe into October grazing. And then a lot of those traditional operations will utilize, for sheep anyway, they'll utilize a herder. So highly gregarious flocking instinct type breeds, Rambouillet, those types of things, so that one guy handles 1,200 ewes and their lambs all summer long with no fence, right? And essentially, you management intensive grazing on the mountain, right? If it's done correctly, it's very beneficial. And then those operations tend to move down to our fall and our spring ranges, which is kind of that mid country. And then we have winter ranges where we don't get as heavy snow load, and are truly deserts, but have that forage hopefully grow through the early spring, and then that vegetation cures and can be utilized for winter type grazing on those operations. So our operation, we sit in, it's called Sanpete Valley, but it truly is surrounded by mountains on both sides. Cold, we freeze. I got a picture on my birthday in June 15th with ice on the sprinklers. We still have some late freezes. Typically by the 1st of June, we're done. We tell everybody you do not plant a garden until after Memorial Day. So if you put it in, it's so funny because people will move down and they'll be putting stuff in, and I'm like, you're just going to replant. But that's how that valley is. So it's high mountain valley. We sit around 5,500 feet in elevation. So short growing season. That way, all of our water, again, is based off of runoff from the mountain. So a lot of ours is stream flow. We actually, in our valley, we don't have any storage. A lot of the Western United States will have storage reservoirs. We have zero storage. So springtime, all that water comes down. A lot of it goes by. It's use. And then all of a sudden, when you need the water in July, it's gone. And so it's really hard to get that. On good years, the stream flows stay fairly consistent, and we can adjust based on that. So from that standpoint, again, in my opinion, it is very conducive to grazing, and it's not very conducive to crop production. I can get away with some cover cropping, but I have to be very particular on what I'm utilizing because I don't have a long growing season. And like I said, by mid-September, we usually have our first freeze. And so you've got that range from June 1st to mid-September is the main frost-free period. So a lot of alfalfa production in the area.
Oh, okay. Alfalfa.
That's one of the main things. Alfalfa and a lot of small grains has been the traditional cropping type system. So a traditional system would be you go in alfalfa, you're in alfalfa for about 5 years. You rotate to a small grain for 2 years, back into alfalfa for 5 years. And that's the traditional system. So like I said, one of the things when we looked at expanding and doing this system was there's no way I could pencil out a profit doing alfalfa hay on this ground. It just wasn't because of the resources weren't there. In fact, the average yield is about 4.2 ton an acre in the Sanpete Valley, which actually there's places in the Sanpete Valley I'd be shocked if it's 2.5 ton an acre, right? Because it just freezes so hard. And now we have a lower spot we call the banana belt. They get 2 weeks either end of us. It's a longer growing season, but guys tease them. But anyway, it's very conducive to cool season species and grasses. And so this year was kind of a rougher year, a little bit of drought, but last year a typical season. So I yielded based on my grazing numbers basing just average what they would consume 7.5 ton an acre. So compared to that average, 2, right? But a lot of that again, I is obviously soil health, but also looking at other species. Those grasses, I've got pictures where the grasses are 18 inches tall in mid to late May, and the alfalfa is just barely peeking out of dormancy. You're getting some other benefits by choosing to do more of a grazing scenario than you would just a cropping scenario.
So when you started with those parcels of land, were they under that pretty much that traditional 5 years alfalfa, a couple years of small greens?
Yeah. So I bought it from a producer. So I grew up just kind of in an adjacent valley, and I knew my dad had a small farm there. I was no way he couldn't farm full time. There was no way I was going to go with it. So I kind of was like, hey, I need to find something. So that producer had been in that traditional system, and it'd probably been in that system for close to 100 years, honestly. I mean, since it started going into production, I guarantee it's been in that type of system.
Oh yeah.
So so it was like I said, going straight from that, and I knew I really always was in the grazing. Started out with range management, right? We do a lot of obviously range management type things. Love the grazing, wanted to get in the sheep business. Really, it's really hard to find those opportunities to get into a range operation. You either it's inherited down through the families, or those permits, those grazing permits don't come up for sale very often. And when they do, you typically don't hear about it. It's extremely hard to kind of get back into that. And so I'm like, I want to build and I want to get into this. Well, how am I going to do it? And so that's when I got into management intensive grazing, doing some experiments with my dad's farm. And then like, hey, I want to do this. And so that's when we purchased this property, that's the whole point of purchasing that property was, hey, this is what we're doing, which actually shocked a lot of people when we didn't go and cut everything for hay and everything else. But yeah, it was purchasing that ground, and it had been that the first year, and it was the first year we did very severe drought. I thought,
of course,
like it was middle of winter and there was no snow. And we made it through. We actually did really well grazing that year, but it took, it's still to this day, it's been, I think 8 years now since we purchased that. And it's still not to where I want it by any means. I mean, I spent some time this fall putting in some more grass. My goal is a diverse pasture mixture. And so I've still got areas that I'm trying to get the soil built to that point that I can get to that point. So.
To get different grasses in there, are you going in with a no-till drill and seeding them? You broadcasting?
A kind of a mix. So, like I said, a lot of these. So when I got the farm, almost every acre was in alfalfa at that time. Some of those were older stands of alfalfa. And so two of the main things I looked at was, okay, can I go into that old stand and get some grasses established as well? Or do I go into a cover cropping type strategy, take it out? And so I've kind of done both, and it's worked both ways. So one, I did just a light tillage pass, essentially on an older stand, and then came in with some grass seed, broadcast that on, and just kind of drug back over it to cover that seed. And actually that one worked very well. Other ones, what I've typically done is I'll graze that alfalfa. So some of them had obviously weeds and things in there as well. I would graze that early spring, and I would truthfully graze it really hard, essentially just to kind of set back some of those things.
Oh, yes.
I'd let it actually green back up, and then I would kill it and no-till in with a cover crop mix. So if it's June, typically what I do is obviously I graze it in the spring. So by June, I do something like sorghum sudan, some buckwheat, some turnips, radishes, things like that, and then cover crop that for 2 or 3 years to build the soil to, again, help with weed competition, and then go back in with a pasture type mix with that. So, and that's been very beneficial. I found that to be the most beneficial, because I'll tell you what, that one that I went straight from alfalfa to a pasture, we did infiltration tests, and it's really productive. It's still a really productive pasture, but we went from the cover crop side, and that infiltrated that 1 inch of water in like 35 seconds. We went to the irrigated pasture that'd been in for 4 or 5 years now, and it took it about 2 minutes. I think it was just over 2 minutes.
Yes.
But it was funny because half of it went down, then it stopped, right? So that you pull that ring out of the ground, and right there was a little hard pan. And that was from when I went in there with that tillage just to break up the soil to put that grass seed in. So that hard pan was still there, even though it was super productive, and it's been very productive. There's still that little hard layer there. So it's very interesting to see. So that's been my goal, is to go in, like I said, improve the soil, focus on the soil health to start with through cover cropping, whether it's 2 or 3 years, and then try to go into a diverse type pasture mix. So
we talked about the initial year of cover cropping, grazing the alfalfa hard, killing it, then going in with your no-till and getting the cover crops in. What do you do the second year?
So usually this has been my biggest challenge, right? Because I'd love to go right back in the fall with another cover crop.
Oh, yeah.
We don't have the moisture, right? So it's kind of been challenges. I'll go in, like, say, with that sorghum stand cover crop, and I'm like, okay, this is going to utilize the nitrogen from that previous alfalfa stand, right? And I've got pictures of 9-foot tall sorghum stand that sheep are grazing in, right? And driving my 4-wheeler through it to put my electric fences in, and I've got pictures where I got 400 using their lambs on a half an acre for a day in some of those things. I mean, it's very, very good. But then once I get that removed, well, I don't have really maybe we'll get some fall rains if I'm lucky to fall plant something. So a lot of times I might use that even later. So maybe rather than graze it through the growing season, I'll use it as stockpile to get me through the winter.
Yes.
And then first thing in the spring, I can go back in with something like peas, oats, vetch. I've done some white mustard. Again, I've even done some turnips and radish in the spring, and they get a lot more vegetative rather than the rooting. But everything I'm doing is essentially for sheep feed. So every cover crop I'm utilizing, I've done Facilia. I've done several of those that maybe aren't as high quality forage, but they can still be edible by the animals at that point too. So, and then after that, if I do a spring one, like I said, if I try to use some like oats and peas, if I graze it at the right time and I got water, I can get multiple growths out of it. So a good year, I've got 3 grazings off of it. And then that gets me to where, okay, well, I'm out of water, so I can't really plant so I do a lot of if I fall plant, I do a late fall plant, what we call a dormant seeding. So I might plant that in mid-November. That way it's in the soil, and then once spring conditions come, jumps right out of the soil first thing. I'm not having to work the soil or do anything with the soil, or I'm late. I feel like I'm behind if I wait till spring. Sometimes I feel like I'm just behind the weed pressure. So I like to put a dormant seeding in if I can. So But it just kind of depends. Right now, I've got some that's dormant seeded. I've got another probably 40 acres that this spring I'll plant, but I've got part of that I'm bale grazing on. So, there's those aspects as well. So,
Yeah, and you have a full-time job off the farm as well?
yeah. So I'm a
So you got to work around
instructor in
that.
the agriculture department at Snow College. So yeah. So we have the 450 years. So that farm is 130 irrigated acres. And then we have another little farm that we bought. So there's a lot of turkey operations in the area. We bought some older turkey sheds that we lamb in, and we bought those 15 plus years ago now. I can't remember when we bought them. And then I do have one or two little leases. So I have some neighbors by where I farm, and I essentially stockpile their grass. They don't have hardly any irrigation. And so I just say, hey, grow that grass all year. I'll come in the winter and graze it off. It's great for me. It allows me some stockpile feed, and it's worked out great. We've done that for several years now. So yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that really helps you through that winter portion. So you go a couple years, 3 years with cover crops. And then are you going with some permanent or some perennial planting then, or you managing it to keep grass coming up naturally?
So typically it'll be a perennial. So the perennials I use, obviously I still like the alfalfa being in there. A lot of times where it's an old alfalfa stand, it just never, I don't hit it hard enough that it ever all disappears. It just thins it down.
Oh, yes.
And so it kind of stays there. So I never put it in a mix because I just have it. Saint Foin is one I like. I really love to utilize Saint Foin in there. So one of the things I do with my cover cropping is that second year or one of the last cover crops I'm going to put in, I will actually put Saint Foin in with it. And so it starts to grow. Saint Foin's kind of slow. That first year, it kind of gets going, doesn't get really tall. The next year it takes off. And so I'll usually put it in that cover crop mix, and it's just kind of underneath. And then when I come back with the rest of the pasture mix, it's kind of ready to take off with the rest of it.
Yeah.
So there's some things, little strategies like that I found, but a lot of it's going to be cool season grasses, obviously in our area, meadow brome, orchard grass. I've got some tall fescue. I love the tall fescue for stockpiling. It does.
Oh, yes.
Stockpiling, and then, like I said, Saint Foin, I have it's truly a true forb. It's called small per neck. It's not a huge forage production, but it is a forb. So it's adding diversity to that mix. But it looks similar to Saint Foin. The plant does it starts to grow. The leaves get a little bit different, doesn't get as tall, but I like to put that in there as well and try to have at least 4 or 5 species in there if I can. And again, I've got some that are maybe 3, that I'm like, okay, well, 3 did great and these others didn't show up, so, but they're great pastures if they're managed right. So,
yeah. In moving to your management, you've talked the whole time, even when you bought the land, you were looking at it with MIG grazing or AMP grazing. Where were you exposed to that?
I heard about it. I was always an Allen Savory fan because of the rangeland aspect.
Oh, yes.
And then I remember what it was, but I just can't remember if it was a conference or I heard of Jim Garish and some things he was doing. I thought, well, I ought to try this. And so I had a group of ewe lambs, and there's probably 60 ewe lambs in this group. And it was a field that production wise wasn't very good. I thought, I'm going to move these every day. And, by the time I got to the end of that field, well, day 30 over here was ready to graze again, and I'm like, well, there is something, this is awesome. What,
Oh, yeah.
And so I thought, okay. And so I kind of really started diving in, and man, I used, polywire. I used all sorts of things. And again, for me, for wanting to grow an operation with limited resources, like, hey, I have to do more of what I got. I have to be more productive. And so that's when we had the opportunity to buy this farm, and it wasn't even a mindset of we're going to produce hay and that's it or whatever. This was, we're going to graze this. And if we have extra forage, we'll cut it and put it up for hay, And so that's kind of been our model. So, and from day one, it was daily moves too. I was like, man, I really love it. Daily moves. And I will say when I do stockpile feed in the winter, it's every 3 to maybe 5 days max. That typically about a 3-day move, just to scatter the nutrients, right? To get the impact too, the impact that I want to have. And so we started doing that. And I still remember, so just there's two highways by where we're at, right? And people looking. And I still have a neighbor that's like, you move that fence every day. And I'm like, yeah, I move it every day. He's like, that's it's like a dairy. You got to milk cows every day. I'm like, yeah, it's 30 minutes. I can go out there and the sheep are all in one spot. So when I started out, I actually wanted to get back into the range model. So I graduated college, went back to the farm, wanted to get into production. So we got up to about 600 head, and I was the sheep herder. I was the one on horseback on the rangeland, which I attribute to a lot of observation, though. I knew what those sheep ate, at what times where they wanted to be, what species they were attracted to, and sheep are browsers. I had this pasture that I was leasing, and I had more grass on that thing and couldn't get those sheep to touch a blade of grass. And I know people say, oh, you're full of them, but that they were browsers. And then they were for all the other stuff. And anyway, so I really learned a lot, but it just was the predators were just huge, especially on a smaller, that's one of the things with the range operation, and especially the grazing model, the larger the number works, right? The small number is hard from a financial aspect, right? It's hard to say, hey, I can hire one guy to watch 300. Not really compared to 200, right? And from a predator standpoint, I always tell everybody, I said, it don't matter if I put 300 ewes and lambs or 1,200 ewes and lambs. They're going to eat 200 of those. It doesn't matter. They're just, so the guy with a lot more lambs, he's not getting a hit, but the guy with smaller, he's getting hit.
Oh, yeah.
And the predator issue is a really big issue, and especially on those open ranges like that. And so it just got to where it was unmanageable. I was like, this isn't working. We've got to do something different. And so that's when I was like, okay. And one of the leases we ended up losing that lease. It got sold to somebody else. And so I'm like, all right, let's reboot here. Let's see what's going on. We actually had a fire on that rangeland too, and I actually burned up 180 plus ewes at one time as well. So I kind of had all these little setbacks that got me to where I am today. So that was where he said, okay, new tool, and I love it. We shoot for high lambing percentage, 185% lambing, and I don't have predator loss now. Very minimal, if any. Maybe a couple lambs a year, and most of that might be a newborn lamb that a crow kills, as it's born essentially. But I don't have that, and it's been really nice because it's allowed me in our area as a smaller producer to be able to be viable in the sheep industry that way. So, and again, even if I look at like benchmarks from a larger production system to this model, a lot of those efficiencies, because of those efficiencies, right? I'm using less ground, more animals, higher efficiencies that way. I'm actually more profitable than a lot of these larger operations. Not to say they're not profitable, but again, from that standpoint, it kind of runs.
Oh, yeah. At Redmond, we know that you thrive when your animals do. That's why it's essential to fill the gaps in your herd's nutrition with the minerals that they need. Made by nature, our ancient mineral salt and conditioner clay are the catalyst in optimizing the nutrients your animals get from their forage. Unaltered and unrefined, our minerals have the natural balance and proportion that your animals prefer. This gives your herd the ability to naturally regulate their mineral consumption as they graze. Our minerals won't just help you improve the health of your animals, but will also help you naturally build soil fertility so you can grow more nutrient-dense pasture year after year. Nourish your animals, your soil, and your life with Redmond. Learn more at redmondagriculture.com. Are you running guardian animals with your sheep?
I do at times. I have a guard dog now, and half the time he turns into a pet with my girls because
yeah, that'll happen.
Yeah, I don't put him out where I'm grazing most. If I'm on some rangeland, so I said I utilize a little bit of rangeland. That's where I need him because it's about 300 acres. It's in 3 big pastures, and I utilize it just for a little bit of time. And there's predator issues there. But when I'm in my other ones, I mean, I'm in moves that are acre and a quarter, and that dog's so bored and there's nothing going on. And then they wander and get in trouble. And it's like, I don't know why I have this dog, but I want him for that rangeland. And so I have one dog that I keep for 2 to 4 weeks of the year. I have this one guard dog, and he does his job, but most of the time he's a princess from my daughters. So, right, or she, I guess it's a female dog. So.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm sure they enjoy her.
Yeah. And it's funny because, I used to really like the herding dogs, and I've got 2 border collies, and they're bored all the time because I don't need them. I open a gate, the sheep, I shut the gate fence, and I'm done. And I'm like, I don't even know why I'm feeding dogs anymore. So, but the girls love them. So I guess that's why I have them. So,
yeah, I often think about getting a border collie. In fact, I had a puppy and had something happen to her, but I think about it a lot. But then when I really stop and think about it objectively, I don't have time and I don't really have a need, but I love the idea.
Yep. It's cool, right? It's like, this is so awesome. And truly on that range operation, you need a great dog,
Oh yeah.
And then you get in this scenario, and this is a totally different deal. And it's like, yeah, that dog, I feel bad. I don't know what it does. It can ride the 4-wheeler with me, I guess. So.
Right. Which will give you some enjoyment there.
Yeah.
With your sheep, you mentioned early on polywire. Do you use polywire? Use electric netting? How do you contain them?
Yeah, so I've moved to the electric netting. So I tried everything. So when I first started, it was polywire and the reels, and trying to find a decent charger, and I got to where I could train those sheep, but then, man, you just have, like, so mine are wooled sheep, obviously. So you got to shock their face. That's the only place you can get them shocked. And so they'll learn, hey, I can stick my head under this and I don't get shocked. And so I've transitioned everything to the netting, just because two main reasons. Predators is one. It keeps dogs out. And mainly where I'm at there, it's more dogs than it is coyotes and things like that. But also it's just, I've had very good success keeping sheep in. And to start with, those sheep, they have to be trained to it just like any other animal. And even the netting, I would have sheep that I had this one old ewe, and she figured out she could shove her head through one of the top netting and went shocked, and then just like drop her head down, and she'd break all of the runs. Yes. And then she'd walk out. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. Yes. So I got rid of her, but now I those ewes are so used to it. The only issues I have is in the spring with new lambs. The new lambs will always test it out.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'll just make sure it's hot. And that's another thing I learned with the charger. The best tool I ever bought was a good charger that I didn't have to worry about. I tried every farm store charger I could find, and dust and everything else, and finally got one I needed. And it just it's just worth the money to get that good charger. It's just totally worth it. So.
Oh, it is. I can remember we tried electric fence for a long time, and it just wouldn't work for us. Why won't it work? I'm reading these books, and Stockman Grass Farmer at the time, and people's using it, but I can't get it to work for me. Well, when I finally spent money that I thought was an awful amount for an Energizer, it started working. So it makes a difference.
It is. It makes a huge difference to have the right tools, and to have enough of it. I'll say that with the fence. And I put fencing on rangelands, that netting through mountains to separate pastures. And that's a little trouble. It's not as bad putting it up. It's taking it down where that's horrible, snagging every little oak, everything. But it works, and having enough. I've always have what I need and maybe a little bit more, because one of the things I found as I started doing this is my neighbors would be like, hey, I got this piece over here, and I'm not going to cut it for head, right? We run out of irrigation water, but it grew 6-7 inches, or it's a wheat field that had some regrowth. And they're like, I don't have any fences. A lot of these guys haven't maintained fences.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's like, hey, you want to graze it? Heck yeah, because they see my fence and they see what I can do. So, but I find on those parts, those areas, man, you need a lot of fence sometimes. And so to have the availability to do that, And then I just always budget in, hey, I'm going to have, $1,000 or $1,200 a year. It just wears out, and just budget that in. And I don't have to replace any. Another year, I got to replace a bunch. But that's a big thing is just always having the tools you need, because when those situations arise, you can be like, oh yeah, I got plenty of fence. You bet, I'll graze that for you.
Oh,
you know? So it's opened up the possibilities. And for somebody trying to get in to the business, even from, like I said, my one neighbor grows just grass. He doesn't have any water, so it's just whatever grass is there. A lot of it's a brome and some other grasses, and nobody else really has the opportunity to graze that besides me, because I can go out there and say, hey, yeah, I can fence it off. And man, I just extended my grazing season another 2 weeks by doing it.
Yeah.
And that's been my goal is so we lamb in mid-March. And that's, like I said, that's still, we can get some snowstorms, but I have those lambing sheds. And the reason I do that for now is it gets really hot in the summer. And so I lamb mid-March. Most of them are done by that first week of April. I actually will lamb my yearlings, my ewe lambs, in May. So I kind of have those two groups. But then those older lambs, I'll wean in mid-June. And by mid-June, I usually have some really good cover crops that are growing. And so those lambs go straight on those cover crops for a month, and then I sell them mid-July before we start getting really, really hot. After that, I found, so those lambs that I have mid-May, I really like them because they're just kind of another extra bunch of lambs out of my ewe lambs. But they will stagnate growth through that. You'll see it. I won't sell them until later. When it gets hot, they just quit growing. So every spring, I'm like, I'm going to lamb in May. Forget this. But I always say, well, I have these barns and it fits what I'm doing. I can lamb them. They're there for a week or two, and then they're on pasture and they're going, and they just grow so good that I've just kind of kept that model. And like I said, those yearlings in May, I will just pasture lamb. Most of those are have a single anyway, because they're just just barely over a year old. And so one lamb's not a big deal. So I'll typically just pasture lamb those. But I do see most of the guys around here are lambing in April and May, but they go on the mountain in the summertime. And so they have those cool, nice mountain pastures, and they can continue that growth there. And down here in the valleys, we've got that heat. And so it kind of slows it down. So that's kind of how my model's been with the lambing there. So
yeah, having those turkey facilities available is a unique edge for you. How are you utilizing those for lambing?
So I was really lucky. So when we bought that, I got 3 big barns. So 2 of the barns are about 150 feet long by 35 foot wide. Another one's 300 feet long by 35 feet wide. So the one barn was set up as a brooder. So it was fully enclosed. So I actually opened up one of the sides, but that's where I lamb. And so I have lambing jugs on one side inside the barn. And so they can come in the barn. Most of them will lamb. I used to lock them under there at night so I could kind of watch, but I don't anymore. I like them to actually just spread out. I mean, some of those ewes, they'll just lay outside in a snowstorm because they're woolly, and you're like, you're crazy. But they come in those lambing jugs. I usually only keep them in there for about 24 hours is what I try to do, and just make sure the ewe's bonded to those lambs, and then I can process the lambs. And then they move out into groups of 8 to 10 in one of my other barns, and they'll be there for about a week and a half. The early ones will probably be there 2 weeks. The later ones may only be there like 4 or 5 days, and then they go out to a pasture. So like I said, I do have some rangeland, and that rangeland is truly a shrub we call greasewood here, which a lot of people hate, but I love it to put ewes and lambs on because it's super high in calcium. It's actually toxic and can kill them if they get too much of it, but it's super high in calcium, and those ewes really milk really well.
Oh, yes.
And they do really well on it. No other species could do good on that stuff like they do. And so it just gives me a place to put them for a week or two until my pastures get going. About the end of April is when I'll move into my irrigated type pasture. I'll move really fast about end of April until middle of May, just to kind of get the weeds more than anything.
Oh, yeah.
Those ewes will select for those weeds, and I'll just move really fast. Then by mid-May, I will have that's when I'll start really grouping those ewes, and that acre and a quarter essentially every day on my moves. So it kind of works out really good. And those facilities are good. Kind of one of those, if you look at it from I got a really good deal. I bought all those barns for the price that I can't even build one of them for.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And so it's been a really nice thing. I can store hay in them if I need to and things like that. I don't use them that much. So it's just kind of one of those like, man, could I sell these and find something else and build bigger? I'm kind of that point right now of there's a lot of old turkey sheds. I could rent one for the month and a half I need it, But those are set up very well. In fact, the one I actually have a clamping system for my use, working system, and it's just under the barn. So anytime I want to, they're under the barn. I built a shearing floor in the one part of the barn. One of the dumb things I ever learned to do was shear sheep. So anyway, I last year thought I was going to be tough, and after teaching here for 8 years, I've learned I've lost shearing numbers every year I've taught. I started out, I could shear 100, and I think I got 115 a day. And every year I've taught, I lose about 10 head. And I'm down to about 50 a day now. So anyway,
I imagine so.
But yeah, so it's kind of nice that way. And it's just kind of nice having that facility, and it's worked very well for us. So yeah.
Oh, it would. And like you said, it's not feasible for you to go in and build that new and use it. We have some old chicken houses on some land that we store hay in. There's no way we would have built those to store hay in, but they work wonderful for that. The hay, we get it out when it's a few years old, and other than being dusty, we still got a great quality bale of hay. So really nice. Now, one thing you're talking about with that facility is jugging. I've never jugged any sheep. So help me out on that. You go out there and check them and they're starting to lamb or super close, you put them in a jug, or have some with lambs and you put them in?
Yeah, so I'll make sure they lamb before I ever put them in a lambing jug. So one of the biggest things with that lambing jug, so I use a 4x5 lambing jug. So my ewes average around 165 to 185 pounds. They're kind of a targy base ewe, but so in that crail, we'll watch them, right? You've got 350 ewes and I lamb 85% of them in 3 weeks.
Oh, I imagine.
So they're really going. And so somebody's there all the time. And what it truly is, the main reason you're watching is because you'll get 2 or 3 in a corner and they'll try to lamb together and then mix and everything else.
Right. Yeah.
And so the nice thing is I've got 2 rows of lambing jugs, but in the middle, there's this 6 foot wide by 150 foot long section in the middle, right, of those lambing jugs. So I can bring a ewe that's starting to lamb, or maybe she's had one, into the end of the barn in that middle section. And then she let her lamb there. Then once she's done, cleaned them off, I'll put her in a lambing jug. And so there's several times we might have 4 or 5 ewes scattered down that alleyway just to keep them separate from the 4 or 5 that may still be lambing out in the crail.
Oh, yeah.
And keeping them that way. The biggest thing for me, like I said, is my lambing percentage is about 185%. One year I had 215% or something like that.
Oh, nice.
So, but it gives you that chance to bond. And I don't like to leave them, like I said, more than 24 hours because they will pick up disease. You've got to keep those lambing jugs clean. So every time a ewe goes in, it's fresh bedding. When she goes out, it's fully cleaned. We use lime just to help dry what any dampness there is, and then put shavings down or straw, because you can pick up disease in there if it's not clean, especially those lambs. You'll get watery mouths, you'll get things like that. They'll pick up through their umbilical cord. And so then we iodine their navels if I need to tag them or mark them. So I'll actually spray paint a number on the ewe and then spray paint the number on the lambs. And it's just ewe number 1, here we go. So we're starting with blue, and I only go to number 100 because I don't want to have to remember anything else. So U1, blue, and then when we get the next 100, it's all right. U1, red, but it's just so, and the lambs, that number only lasts about 2 weeks. But after 2 weeks, they're either bonded or they're not. Right. They're all the problems are going to show up. And that's the thing with them out into the groups of 8 or 10. It gives the chance that they've mixed up with those ewes now. If there's anything that's going to happen that first week, I can see it. And then after that, they're on their own, But if the ewe has mastitis, something happens, she gets mastitis, then I can catch it and pull those lambs if I need to. But again, that's kind of that scenario. So you bring them in, like I said, iodine their navels. I will actually dock and castrate in those at 24 hours old. So that way those lambs, they're in that system, and then a few hours later I'll move them out.
Oh,
so they haven't rolled around with all the other lambs somewhere else and lost their scent. It's just right there. It's way less stressful on the lamb. They're small enough at that point that it's not as big a deal. And so that's worked very well. And then later on, the nice thing about doing that then is later on, I don't have to run them into a corral and catch them again just to do that. It's already done. So kind of makes that handy. So
castration. Are you banding or are you cutting?
Yeah, so I band everything.
Oh, yeah.
I will, let's say for some reason I can't find them right then. I'll actually leave them long docked, and then later on I'll go ahead and do it. And if I do it then, I might do it with a knife, and then just make sure I've got, something for fly control and iodine and things like that. But
right.
but anyway, it just kind of depends on, like I said, if I can't find something later on, I'll catch them a month later, and usually I find them. Maybe they're a crypt orchid, and there's just one there, and that's it. But yeah, that's kind of how we've worked that.
I know I used to ban my lambs within that first 24 hours, and a few reasons I stopped. One is I do drift lambing with mine, and they're out in the pasture, and I just have some ewes that just go crazy. So that didn't work out good, except as I progress with these hair sheep, I'm thinking about the ones that want to go crazy like that. I'll just mark them for sale and get better mothering. But it was just hard to ban those little ones. Of course, they're hair sheep lambs as opposed to your wool lambs that are a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I've done the same thing because that's kind of how I do those yearlings. It's kind of a drift lambing, and that you got to catch them right at the bat.
And you do, or you can't catch them.
Yeah, and I worry at that point too of just like I don't want to break the bond between mom and lamb, and so I just kind of stay out of the way. And we will after we're done, we'll usually run them in a corral and we'll just band them that way with those ones. But it's different, and I've looked at. I really have, it is labor intensive. When those 3 weeks that we're in it is extremely labor intensive. And how can I reduce this? And like I said, I've done it with my yearlings and my later lambing sheep with just on pasture, and I like it. There's aspects. Obviously, you're going to have a higher death loss. I'm like, okay, I know I get a little higher death loss because, hey, this ewe had twins, and in the lambing jug, I can make sure that the teats are stripped out. I can make sure both lambs got on there, and I'm good to go. Right on pasture. You can look for those things, and you kind of got to know what to look for, but it's a little bit harder to do that. And even in that intensive lambing with the barn, the ewe plays a big factor. Those wild ewes, because I'll have ewes. My ewes are really docile. They're used to me. They see me every day, all year long. I'm right next to them. So I pick up their lamb. They're bunting me half the time, right? They're about running me over. I mean, there's ewes that I'm cussing at because they're about knocking me down. But in reality, I'm like, this is the ewe I want because she is right on me.
Oh, yeah.
And follows you right in. And then you've got some that, some of these range ewes that they don't have that interaction. Man, I bought some older ewes from a guy several years ago, and I couldn't hardly get them close to the lambing jug, right? You go to get the lamb, and they take off to the end of the cradle, and you're like, how am I ever do this? So you either have to catch them or just fight it all day. So there still is that aspect of it of, a lot of those guys will set up their facility so they can almost hurt them that way rather than have them follow. But there still is that aspect of it. And truly, like I said, I've liked it. If you get, like I said, with my ewes, it's fairly easy because they start lambing. They kind of know what's going on. They know the routine. I think half of them like it because they know they're going to get pampered in that lambing.
Yeah.
And then they go out and like I said, it's worked very well. It's kept our lambing percentage high, our weaning percentage high, and worked that way. So, like I said, but if I had to build those barns brand new now, boy, that'd be a huge economic hit.
Yeah, it would.
So, yeah.
With your sheep, you're getting probably some singles in there, some twins, some triplets. how do you identify so that those singles? I'm making an assumption here that you probably don't want to keep too many singles.
Yeah.
How are you marketing or marking them so you know they're singles later on?
Yeah. And just a little background too. So most Western range operations, we're fairly similar. We'll run a crossbred. So we have white face ewes that we crossbreed with black face rams. Every one of those lambs will just be, we'll do a long tail dock. So the tail will be 3 to 4 inches long. And that's just a way to identify they're all going to terminal market, right? None of those are going to be kept as replacements. And then we'll run a certain number of white face that those will be our replacement ewe lambs. And some guys may run white face for 2 weeks and then everything after that's black face, right? But it's just kind of like, hey, I need at least 20% replacement. And so I'm gonna run 20% white face rams. There are purebred guys that will run straight, whatever,
right.
But that's kind of typical. So we kind of do that. So that's the way. Anything that's what we call a smut face lamb, right, or a crossbred lamb is market. So, but on the ewe lambs, my white ewe lambs, so I will actually, they're the only ones I actually put an ear tag in. And the only reason I put an ear tag in is so I know they're ewe lambs. So when I'm sorting later and they're running down the chute at me, I can look for an ear tag. And then the number, and it's just 1 to whatever, I can tell what ones were early in the season or the late. But I do an ear notch, so a single won't get an ear notch. And all it is just like a little pit notch on the top of the front part of their ear where the ear tag is. So a single won't get it, a twin will get 1, and a triplet will get 2. And so later on, right, so I always say we're great at record keeping in agriculture, right? And so I lose every book I ever get somewhere.
We keep so many records, but then to go back and use them, it's just not, we don't do a good job at that. But we write a ton down.
Yeah, we write it down, and then we're like, well, am I going to use this or not? And so that was just an easy way for me to say, okay, this was a twin. I'm selecting first from my twins and triplets. And if I need a few more, I'll go back. And I try not to. So like my ewe lambs, if I have a ewe lamb out of a ewe lamb and it's a single, I don't dock it. That's ewe lamb, right? She's breeding ahead of everything else. And so I don't do it that way. And most of those are in a later group anyway. But if I have a single and it's one of the smallest things out there, I'm like, I don't want to keep this. And I attribute that to our high lambing percentages. We've really focused on that. And also the flushing, being able to put those ewes on a higher quality feed right before breeding. I mean, I'll actually put them on my lowest quality feed I can about a month before I'm going to breed for 2 weeks. And then I put them on that high quality feed again 2 weeks before I put rams in. And that's been a huge boost. And truly the grazing management system does that. Like when you move those ewes every day, they're on the best feed every day. Rather than putting them in a pasture for 30 days and for the first week they're on the best feed, the next week they're on the second best feed, and by the time they're done, they're just scraping by, right? And I always tell these guys, I said, you'll see that in your lambing percentage because that's what a lot of guys will utilize for fleshing is these alfalfa fields. So they'll come off the dry ranges, go to these alfalfa fields. I said, you watch that first week, you'll have a lot of lambs. And then it'll just slowly taper off on your lambing percentage. They're like, you're right. What's the deal? And I said, that's because they're losing the flush. So anyway, it's worked very well for us. And again, it's not bringing in any type of additional feed. It's just utilizing the pastures to do that. And so it's like I said, that's attributed to that high lambing percentage there. And again, traits that I look for. Good bags. So I've started raising my own rams too. So there's a lot of, ram sales out there and things like that. But to get what I want, right? The hard thing is what's the background on these animals? What's the ewe even look like? Especially on white face rams. On black face rams, I'm not near as worried because they're all terminal. But white face. So I've started taking those 5 and 6 year old ewes that have twin lambs, that their udders look great, and starting to save ram lambs from those and essentially creating what I want for my operation. And it's different. My ewes are not the traditional Western ewes that these range guys are using. I've got some Dorset in there. I've got some Polypay in there. Like I said, my main base is Targhee, but I've brought in some of these others that are really good in the system I have and bring some more productivity to them. So yeah.
Are you introducing any new genetics through sires once in a while, or are you totally just raising your own?
No, I have to, just to try to avoid too much inbreeding, if that's what you call it. I said it's line breeding if it works, it's inbreeding if it doesn't. So.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
But I figure with the population I have, what's the likelihood that I'm going to get much of that? And it's fairly slim. So, but every so often, I really like the Targhee breed for the maternal instincts here, plus the wool. I really enjoy wool. Huge value in wool. I wish our society could get back to utilizing a lot more of that wool. I use it I wear it every day. I love it. But for my operation where wool prices are down, that's not been my main focus. I don't want to lose it. I don't want to go so far that I lose it and lose the value that I do get. But as far as quality, I'm on the tail end of high quality, if you want to say that. So I'm 24 micron. They typically say 24 and below is a higher quality. Really high quality is an 18 micron type wool. So I'm right on the edge of that, so I can still sell it to where if I was 26, 27, I would have a really hard time of selling that product. But at the same time, introducing some of those traits. So for a few years, I had those turkey sheds, and I thought, well, I'm going to do accelerated lambing. These sheds are sitting here empty. And, one of the big factors there is increased cost because you're feeding those animals a lot more and running the numbers on it. I'm so much more profitable in my pasture operation. So that's where I actually started with some Polypane Dorsets, trying to find some genetics there. Like I said, I actually really enjoyed the system to manage it. I loved managing the system. Now, again, from a profit standpoint, it costs more money. You have to be extremely efficient in your production, super high lambing rates, and you have to have the price there, and the feed costs have to be low. And that's why in the Western United States, you don't see those things because feed costs are high. We're shipping all the corn, everything this way, right? So Midwest fits it. So, but I tried it, and ever since I've actually had a fall lambing set that I've just kind of said, okay. And so I lamb those on pasture in September. And we did a set this year that lambed on pasture in September. And then they're on pasture till they're about 2.5 months, and then I wean them. And it's worked good. I love those fall lambs. They're kind of fun. It's just kind of neat to have them out of season, and people are kind of looking at you like you're weird. Well, you got lambs. I actually had one student. I took students out there to process those lambs. They're like, don't you know this isn't the right time of year? But it's been good. It's been a learning experience. I really learned a lot on the reproductive end by doing that. But again, from a standpoint, I kind of had to look at, okay, where's my true passion? It is grazing. It is soil health. It is those aspects. I love that. And just by far utilizing and being efficient in those areas has brought the profitability to the operation. So.
Yeah, it makes sense. I love looking at those accelerated lambing or kidding programs and dream about implementing them, but they're more labor, more inputs than I want to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And we had it when we started, and I was just doing it with a couple hundred ewes. And it was fun. I love being out there and every day and watching those lambs and things. But like I said, it was like, man, I'm losing money. This cost is too high. I'm trying to get this super high lambing percentage, which is so hard. You're utilizing hormones to try to get the out of season going and things like that, which those are expensive. And I'm like, this is not working, but it was just one of those. I thought, hey, I've got these barns, is this a way that from a standpoint of growth, how could I grow my operation, to make it maybe full time,
Right.
And so anyway, so that's what we looked at, and we're still at that now. And that's one thing. So I presented several conferences and things like that to some young producers. And I said, the biggest thing is rather than I buy this land. So let's say that farm I bought, that payment is the same cost, whether I have 100 ewes and I just turn them out there, or I have my 450 ewes. I still have the same payment. And it's the same ground, right? I've essentially doubled my production, reduced my input costs, and I'm paying the same payment, right? That's why I always push is, those management practices make this huge difference. And it's literally moving sheep every day. That's the main difference. Besides just saying, hey, I could break this up into 4 or 5 pastures and I could turn them out there. But by moving them every day for 30 minutes to an hour, I doubled my production. And that's the difference maker. The ground's going to cost the same regardless. And so, and around here, price of the ground is crazy. I actually couldn't buy that ground today and pencil it even grazing. There's no way. It's so crazy. Yeah. But when I look at expanding, though, I still is like, okay, what is my profit per acre? And that makes that even, maybe I can make that work, And we've actually, like I said, I've got into that. Got to my goal is as we get this whole thing, hopefully into more permanent pastures. I do love the cover crops, though. I don't know if I can ever let that go because I get so much production out of those cover crops.
Yes,
that I just love it, and it'll probably end up being a pasture to a cover crop and then back to a pasture. Maybe it'll be my system because I just love them so much. But to bring on additional income with maybe stalker steers, we've looked at that on the good years. So what we've typically done is when I have that excess, so especially in June and July, I typically have more feed than what I can graze, and so we cut that for hay. And then, but later in the season when things slow down, well, now I'm matching my production with what I have. So it's been a balancing. 2 years ago, I probably could have brought on 100 head of stalker steers for another 3 months. But this year, I couldn't do it. I thought I almost did it because I thought, I'm doing really good. And it was 1st of June. And I'm like, I got more feed than I need. And I was actually behind. And I was glad I didn't because it never rained until October. So I was like, well, that was so I didn't. But it allowed me to graze, and I'm still grazing right now. Usually I can graze to at least the 1st of the year, and then I get into the bale grazing that I do, and that takes me typically to about mid-February, and then I'll bring those ewes in, we'll shear, we'll get ready for lambing. They'll lamb mid-March, and then, like I said, by the end of April, they're all out grazing again. So yeah.
Yeah, I know for us this year, we had a pretty good year for rain. We had a little bit of dry period during late summer, but that's normal, and it wasn't excessive.
Yeah.
But we had so much early rain, we weren't going to bale any hay, and we ended up baling more than what we normally do, which now means I'm going into winter with not near the stockpile I wanted to go into winter with.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's a balancing act, what to do with that surplus. The goal going in was we were just going to let it be out there, just rest that, and then graze it later. Then we got so much, we got antsy and baled hay.
Yeah. And that's what it is. It's truly that balancing act because, there's this point I'm like, okay, I got to get the swather out. We got to cut this. Like, I'm ahead. And I'm like, no, I'm going to wait. And I'm so glad I waited because even though it got taller than I wanted it to or whatever, that just got me through the season, and it is a huge balancing. I'd say that's the biggest thing with it is observation's key. Every day is different. So I'll tell people like, I graze it really fast at the end of April. And then I probably am back there by mid-May, right? And then I may be back there by June, this 30-day. Anytime I explain this to students, I just try to use this 30-day model for hay production.
Oh, yeah.
But I said, but the problem is after I graze at that time, I may have to wait 60 plus days to get the growth back to where it needs to be, right? I can't do this calendar and a type operation. I have to be observant. I have to see what's going on and adjust it from there. And especially in a drought year, it's like, okay, maybe this is just going to have to get a little ranker, but I've got it. I've got feed, or whatever it is. So, but big balancing act.
It is an excellent points there. Continuing on a drought, what do you do in a drought year?
Yeah. So we had a real bad drought a few years ago, and I thought we would be okay. So that was when we bought this farm. It was kind of like, okay, what's my capacity? Right. And so the first year I buy it, we're into this drought. And so, but I wanted to build my numbers up, and I knew I could. looking at historical production, I'm like, okay, this is what I think I can run. And so I got there, and I probably went a little beyond there because we had a good year, right? So I was like, oh, I can go a little bit bigger. Well, that was a mistake because the next year was a drought. So I ended up selling that excess. I was like, okay. And then it was like, okay, I really got to focus. What is my capacity here? And so, like I said, it's typically about, I have 350 ewes with lambs, and then I usually have 80 to 100 yearlings that are my ewe lambs. And I'll usually kind of run them separate most of the year if I can. If not, I can combine them. But I found out that's my capacity. But, like I said, in June, my capacity could probably be 600 ewes. But then by August, it's only that 350, right? And so that's been my key is, okay, find out where it is on almost a drought year, a lower preset year. And a drought year is still, like I said, that 1 year I ended up selling ewes and lambs. And I sold, most of them were like 5-year-old ewes with lambs. I just kind of was able to work through and get rid of maybe some things I might have got rid of anyway. And it worked out really good. But most of the time, that's what I found out is figure out what your carrying capacity truly is, not at a one-time pitcher, but for the whole season you want to graze. And if that season's 5 months or 9 months, figure out what that number is. And then when you have those extras, figure out, do I cut it for hay? Do I bring on stalker steers if that's an option for a couple of months? That's one thing we're still looking at is if I picked up some steers in the fall, fed them through the winter, and then as soon as I had that feed, could I put them on grass? And if it was 1 month in a drought year, it's 1 month, but maybe in a good year, it was the 3 or 4 months, and then sell those animals or bring on others. I've had several people ask me, hey, would you bring on more? And I just hesitate to do it because, man, every year is so different. It's, and I'm just like, I don't dare bring on 200 more ewes. And then by July, I'm saying, hey, you got to come get them, because that's going to put me in a hole on my own operation because they're going to take feed that I could have used later too. So I just kind of like my own. We actually started doing some chickens as well this last year, and turkeys. We did 20 turkeys and butchered those. That was an experience for me. So, but
will you do that again?
We'll do it again. We started, I said, hey, I want to do this. And I never thought I'd raise chickens and turkeys. I'm in this big turkey area. They probably hate me because I got them on pasture, but I haven't had any loss from them. Very easy. I built some portable cages to move. They're 16 by, I think they're 8 foot wide is what I made them. And then we can move those every day. There's a certain amount, about 50 broilers fit in each one of those, and then about the 20 turkeys. But I love it. I'm like, this is awesome. And I can utilize those in my kind of my problem areas. That I need to really build the soil. I'm like, man, they fit really good. So I got kind of these little pieces like, hey, I got this acre over here that, man, I can't really graze it, and it just doesn't really fit. But man, I can use those birds, and it's just that's what it's been. And I will say it's different because you have to direct market those birds, right? The lambs, I get contracts for the lambs, or if I'm in a pinch, I can haul them to the auction. Well, I can't haul these chickens to the auction, Right. So we're working on building those marketing channels to be able to do that, because I'd like to increase that, because we actually started, we've got some eggs. So I built me if you've ever seen a sheep camp, so it's what the sheep herders would stay in. I built a mini sheep camp for my chickens. So it's got a ramp that comes down and they go in there. It's got the nesting boxes, so we can just follow the sheep as we graze. It's just a wagon that pulls forward, and man, it's been fun. My wife loves that. She loves those chickens now, and so I'm in trouble. We're having chickens forever now.
You will.
Yeah.
Now, you said you're following the sheep, so you're not keeping them in the same paddock with the sheep, but behind them.
Yeah, just behind them. So the sheep will move forward. We'll move that wagon in there, and then they're just free roam. We just open the door and they free roam out, and then we herd them in at night and shut the door on them, and then like you can pull the wagon forward when we move. Worked really good. So we've got plans to, like I said, this is our trial. So we only got 20 of the layers right now, and they're laying way more eggs than we eat. So but the plan is to have 4 or 5 of those that can kind of move around, and it's been really neat to kind of see what they go after, bug wise, even weeds, little weed shoots and things like that they'll pick and things. And like I said, we've done the broilers and the turkeys, and that was pretty neat. It's pretty fun. So to do it.
Right. A little bit different. I keep thinking about turkeys. I did chickens one year, but they didn't turn out quite as well as I wanted, but it's in the back of my mind. Let's try it again, so.
We thought we would release for Thanksgiving. This is what I thought. My girls could sell these and make some money, right? Well, I learned that lesson that they weren't as interested in that idea as I was. But, But we went to harvest these birds, and they had just got bigger than the bags I built. And so I just pieced them out, which was really easy, drums and thighs. And I was like, man, that was actually slick, And but that was, to me, I was like, this is actually really good. And then we cooked the one for Thanksgiving. And I cooked it on my smoker, and I've never had a better turkey in my life than that bird. And I will, I'll never cook one another way. And those turkeys were excellent, and we just got kind of straight runs. So we had hens and toms, and the hens fit in the bags, but the toms didn't. They got big on me.
Oh yeah.
So
What breed did you go with, or hybrid?
I think they were Dutch White Holland. I got them from Valley Hatchery back east, and just in the mail, and like I said, I said, well, let's try it. Let's see what happens here. And they're kind of interesting. Turkeys don't grow fast, and then all of a sudden they're huge. So, but it shocked me how much grazing. All growing up, I'm like, chickens and turkeys don't graze. What are you talking about? But I put them in this alfalfa, the alfalfa is 2 foot tall, and they're just going to town, just stripping that. And by the time you're there the next day, it's 8, and you're like, oh my word, this is amazing, and you'd open up their trough, then there's all that green forage in there, This is pretty neat. I had to take videos because I'm like, just to prove myself wrong that they do that. So yeah, really neat to see. Like I said, you can see that ground, getting more productive. And so that's what I'm looking at now is where my turkey sheds are. There's no irrigation, and it's just there's 30 acres there, and 10 of it's utilized with sheds and trails or whatever. And I'm like, could I utilize that? I use it just a little bit when I'm lambing. I get a little bit of green, and I can turn them out there, a few of them, and then as I'm waiting to move them somewhere else, I'm like, man, maybe I could really utilize this further by using the turkeys or the chickens.
Oh, yes.
So that's kind of one of our ways. Like I said, I'm looking to expand with lower input costs. So, yeah.
Right. And that'll be interesting to see how that goes for you. Everyone I talk to, I'm trying to even think if I've even heard anything negative about turkeys. People just really seem to enjoy raising turkeys.
Yeah. So we had grasshoppers like crazy this summer. So I told my girls, I said, get those flags, and we turn them out, and I haven't heard the turkeys.
Oh, yeah.
So it worked. There's a few days that, all right, get your flag. We're going to herd turkeys for an hour.
Oh, perfect.
But it was fun. You could herd turkeys. And so the history of San Pedro, like I said, huge turkeys, and they're still producing turkeys today, mainly confinement. But when they started, they would herd the turkeys. And they would take the turkeys out, and they'd eat the bugs, they'd eat the grass, whatever, and then they'd bring them back in. That's how the whole turkey industry started here, was with them herding the turkeys. So it was kind of fun. You'd open up that cage, and they'd all run out, and then they'd just go to town on eating these grasshoppers. And then after a while, you could just herd them back in. So it was kind of fun. So.
Oh, yeah. Sounds like it was. Matt, it's time we transition to our famous 4 questions. Same 4 questions we ask of all of our guests. Our first question, what's your favorite grazing grass related book or resource?
I got 2. I was ready for this one.
So, well, good.
Yeah. But I had to grab the books to make sure I got them right. So I still love The Soil Owner's Manual by John Sitka. Still one of my favorite ones as far as anything soil health related. And I'm going to do 2 on you. The other one I just started reading, it's The Art and Science of Shepherding.
Oh, I haven't seen
Premier
that
One Supplies has this. And it
okay.
follows the sheep herders in the French Alps. But there's so much knowledge on grazing in this book. It just amazed me. In fact, it references a sheep herder from Utah from 1910 who wrote a book on sheep herding. And I had to go find that book, and I found it and bought it. And it's like a repurposed copy, but it was so interesting because it talks about a cattle ranch in Utah, and they hired this guy who had herded sheep his whole life, and he was kind of from that area, and he could herd those cattle and double their forage. And they're like, what is going on? But he understood all of those principles. And so that's been one I've really liked lately that I haven't finished yet. I just got into it. I really like that. So.
Oh, yeah. It sounds very interesting. I'll have to look it up.
Yeah.
Our second question, what's your favorite tool for the farm?
I think I brought up a good fence charger. Fence charger. That has made the difference in my life.
It'll change your world.
It'll change everything. That is by far my favorite tool. And I will say, I use an app that's a measurement app that I can hurry and calculate acreage. And measure distances. So if I need to put fences, I know, hey, this is the distance, or how big is this pasture, and how many cells can I break it up into, or whatever. So.
What app is that?
Man, I have to look it up. It's
you know where it is on your phone?
Know where it is. Yeah, Field Area Measure.
Oh, yeah.
App. So it's one that I really like. So.
Oh, very good. Thirdly, what would you tell someone just getting started?
I would say get educated. Get as much education, and that doesn't necessarily mean going to college. I mean, I'm a college professor, I guess. So, but understand what you're doing. I think one of the biggest things I see is a lot of times we're going through the day-to-day without even knowing what's the point behind it, right? It's kind of that old adage. Yeah, why are we doing this? And nobody knows the why. So I really am always after the why. And I think when you understand the why, then it starts to open up the paradigm shifting of, hey, why am I doing it that way? What if I do this, right? Don't be afraid to try something. And I always say it's a coffee shop mentality. We're afraid somebody's going to make fun of us for trying something new. Who cares? They're not paying your bills.
Right.
Like, go do it. And if they laugh, who cares? Like, it's not a big thing. You're only going to gain from it, And I'm not saying change everything at once. Change a little bit at once and try it and see. And it's been interesting. So we've been putting on a seminar series, and got a producer and says, my father-in-law is going to run the ranch till he dies, and I can't change his mind, and we're doing it this way regardless, and I can't change their mind. And I try to say, if you can focus on one little spot, what's one little spot you could start with? And start working from that. But don't be afraid to go out there and learn, and gain a passion. If you're passionate about it, you'll just dive right in and you'll just learn so much. But don't be afraid to try.
Yeah. Excellent advice. And lastly, where can others find out more about you?
So I have a Facebook. I don't have a website. It's called Dry Bottom Farms. So just like it sounds. That's because we don't get any rain. But that's Dry Bottom Farms is a Facebook page I use. I try to post some videos on there and things like that of what's going on. That's truly what I kind of built that for, is to kind of show people what we're doing and give them a chance to see some of those things. And that's probably one of the best ways you can reach out is there. And through you can look me up at Snow College in Utah and find some information there as well. So,
very good.
So this has been enjoyable. I like it. So
yeah, I've enjoyed the conversation. I appreciate you getting on here and sharing with us today.
You bet. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Really appreciate Matt coming on here today and sharing about his operation. A couple of things that stood out to me. One, he's using private land. He's using marginal land in an area where public land dominates. We also talk about his efficiency in his lambing. He ear tags the ewe lambs, so he can tell who's a ewe lamb coming down the alleyway. He does a very simple numbering of them, 1 to 100. And that way, he knows 1 is the oldest 99's one of the youngest, which is a great way to do that very efficiently and get the desired goal. We talked about the ear notching he does for twins and triplets, so he knows. He talks about docking a long tail for when it's a single, so, if you want to get rid of those singles. And also if they need more attention later. Those may be common practice to wool producers, but some of them I really hadn't thought about, but I like how he's working to make his farm more efficiency and do that little bit to get the maximum value out of it. The other thing I really liked that I'd love to see more farmers do is his breeding program. In fact, I was just talking with my father about our breeding program. And when I look at what I want to do for my herd, my goal is to take and get a very maternal herd. I prefer red cattle. I don't mind the spots either. So either or, but get that maternal breed. We put a maternal bull out there so that we can produce X number of replacements each year. And then when that amount of time's passed that we think we're going to get enough replacements, we put terminal sires out there. And that's that Western breeding philosophy with wool sheep. Use a white face ram for a little while, and then you put black face out there. You can immediately know visually who is bred to be maternal and going to stay in your flock, and who's a terminal, which means they just go to town. For us with a red cow herd, you can do that. You're using a red maternal breed bull, and you're focused on getting enough heifers replacements that you want there. And then beyond that, you can throw in a Angus bull or black Simmental or something that's black. You could also use Charolais that's got the dilute gene in it. But to get those calves that are different colored, then it's easy to tell. If it's a red calf, it's our maternal line. We want to keep those heifers. If it's black or smoky or yellow, those are all calves that go to town. I love that concept. Very easy to make some decisions and reduce some of that decision fatigue as we think about animals. Like always, thank you for listening and share this episode with someone who would benefit. More grass, better soil, happier livestock. Keep on grazing grass, and we will see you next week.